The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, I completely disagree with the insinuation that the member is making. The Auditor General is completely independent of us. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Did the Minister approve any of the suggested changes to the Auditor General's report on fighter jets?
The Honourable Minister.
No.
The Honourable.
Will the Minister's office approve the request to the Office of the Auditor General to remove the recommendation that Canada not purchase the used Australia F-18s?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, myself or my office are completely independent of the Auditor General. Thank you.
The Honourable Member.
Mr. Chair, was any direction from the PMO given to the Minister or his staff regarding the deletion of the recommendation not to purchase the Australian F-18s?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, as I stated, the Auditor General is completely independent of us. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Mr. Chair, did the Minister authorize the CDS to meet with the partisan political advisors to the Prime Minister, Telford and Butts, before initiating the decision to suspend Vice Admiral Norman?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, as I stated a number of times before, the entire process for this case has been completely independent, and it has been confirmed by the prosecution and defence as well. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Normal for the CDS to bypass the Minister to brief the PMO staff, accompanied by now disgraced National Security Advisor, about Vice Admiral Norman?
The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Chair, as I stated, the entire process has been completely independent. I'm happy to read the quote that I received, but I'm probably going to get cut off. No other factors were considered in this decision, nor was there any contact or influence from outside the
The Honourable Member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Does the Minister believe that Vice Admiral Norman was subjected to biased treatment by his department between November 2015 and today?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, in our process, it's very important to remain independent, and that's exactly what we've done. It was confirmed by the prosecution and by defence. And when the circumstances have changed, Mr. Chair, we've reviewed the requirements, and now the legal fees.
The Honourable Member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
The Minister explained why he hired CBC reporter James Cudmore.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, all my staff are hired on their merits, and I thank them for the tremendous work that they do. Thank you.
Honourable Member. I'm sorry?
Who recommended him?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, as I stated, all my staff are hired on their merits. Thank you.
The Honourable Member.
How many other interviews had he conducted before giving the job to this select reporter from the CBC who had reported on the contract interference by Minister Bryson?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, as I stated, everyone that gets hired by my office are hired on their merits. Thank you.
The Honourable Member.
When was the Minister made aware of the arrival of the August 31st, 2018 letter to André Fillon regarding the U.S. Defense Department's concerns over Canada's future participation in the Joint Strike Fighter program?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of what the member is referring to. One thing I can tell you is that we are committed to making sure that we deliver on the right aircraft for our Canadian Armed Forces through our open and fair competition. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Mr. Speaker, I was referring to the letter to Mr. Fillon that was included in the MacDonald-Laurier report and added as an appendix. How did the Minister respond to that letter, or did he?
Minister.
Mr. Chair, I'm actually very proud to be able to stand up and say we're committed to making sure that our Canadian Armed Forces are going to get all the tools that they need. Through our defence policy, where it's been costed, more importantly, Mr. Chair, it's fully funded. Thank you.
Honourable Member.
Did the Minister or his office have any part in the development of that response letter?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, from all the questions that the member is asking, I just stated, myself as the Minister of National Defence, my responsibility is to making sure that women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces have all the tools necessary, and that's what we're committed to doing. Thank you.
The Honourable Member.
Was any direction from the PMO given in the development of that response letter?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, we're committed to making sure that we have an open and transparent competition, go through the procurements through all, and making sure that we focus on the delivery. Because we're focused on number one, Mr. Chair, that's our people in the Canadian Armed Forces. Thank you.
The honourable member.
Did the minister authorize the use of code words and phrases to bypass ATIP requests on the Norman case?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, I think I've answered that question many times, and I stated before, the entire process has been completely independent and been very cooperative throughout the entire process. Thank you.
Honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Was the minister aware of the decision to use code phrases?
Honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, as I stated, the entire process that we have gone through when it comes to this case has been completely independent. It's been verified, confirmed by the prosecution and defense. Thank you.
Honourable member.
First made aware of the use of code words?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, when it comes to any type of a judicial process, it's important to remain independent. And that's exactly what we have done, and it's been confirmed by the prosecution and defense. Thank you.
The honourable member.
Does the minister approve of the decision to use code words?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, we do not use code words in the process. And one of the things I want to say, the entire process that we've gone through has been completely independent, and this has been explained by the many witnesses in the previous trial. Thank you.
Honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Has the minister authorized code words or phrases in any other ATIP inquiries?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, I have a hard time keeping up with the acronyms in the Canadian Armed Forces. Thank you.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Were any code words used to bypass ATIPs regarding the national shipbuilding strategy?
The honourable minister for National Defence.
Mr. Chair, the entire ATIP process is completely independent of my office. Thank you.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Were any code words used to bypass ATIPs regarding the purchase of Australian F-18s?
The honourable minister of Defence.
Mr. Chair, as I stated, the entire ATIP process is completely independent, and if the member wants to talk more about how we're working and with the Canadian Armed Forces, happy to do so. Thank you.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Were any code words used to bypass ATIPs regarding the proposed purchase of Super Hornets?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, when it comes to, we're committed to making sure that the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces have all the tools necessary for the Air Force. And I've actually also can have a list I'd love to talk about the work that we're actually doing on base Petawawa. Thank you.
The honourable member.
Were any code words used to bypass ATIPs regarding the upcoming competition to replace the CF-18s?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, as I stated, the entire ATIP process is independent of my office. Thank you.
The honourable member.
Mr. Chairman, were any code words used to bypass ATIPs regarding the infamous 2017 Team Canada booze and abuse flight?
The honourable minister.
We are committed to making sure that we create an environment for our women and men in the Canadian Armed Forces that inclusive to all, and that's exactly what we're going to be focused on, Mr. Chair. Because they focused on other things, Mr. Chair, maybe that's why they didn't deliver for the Canadian Armed Forces, because they kept cutting.
That's right.
And they keep continuing on the same.
Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Did Mr. Finn write a memo claiming the shipyard chosen to build the temporary supply ship incapable of doing so?
The honourable minister of National Defence.
Mr. Chair, if I can just have the question repeated, please. Thank you.
For Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Did Mr. Finn write a memo claiming the shipyard chosen to build the temporary supply ship say it was incapable of doing so?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, we're committed to making sure that our Navy have all the tools necessary, and including the two joint supply ships. Mr. Chair, the reason this is so important, they can laugh at this, Mr. Chair. They allow a capability, Mr. Chair, to that we actually don't have joint supply ships, Mr. Chair. We're focused on delivering for our Canadian Armed Forces.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Did Mr. Finn meet with the RCMP during their investigation of the Norman case?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, I encourage the member to, if he wants to ask further questions regarding whether it's main estimates of the Canadian Armed Forces, I'm happy to do so. We are committed for that, and our folks within our system are all.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Did the deputy approve Mr. Finn's legal costs?
Minister.
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to be able to answer further questions on how we're going to be supporting the Canadian Armed Forces. And this is the type of distraction that they continually want, where we try to take focus.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
The minister said he regretted what happened to Vice Admiral Norman, yet he would not use the word apologize. Yet he has to meet with Vice Admiral Norman. Why is that?
Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Chair, as I stated, it's so important to making sure that we keep these processes independent. When the circumstances change, Mr. Chair, the criteria were met and immediately authorized the reimbursement of the legal fees. And yes, I absolutely.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Is the minister personally holding a grudge against Vice Admiral Norman?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, I respect Vice Admiral Norman's service to this country as I do with all the Canadian Armed Forces. And yes, I just stated that, yes, I respect his.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Is he being vindictive, just like the Prime Minister, against this decorated soldier?
The honourable minister.
Mr. Chair, I respect the tremendous service by Vice Admiral Norman. And that's why it's so important to remain completely independent of the process. Right. And immediately, when the circumstances were changed, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
What steps and specific actions has the minister taken to ensure Vice Admiral Norman will be able to return to the Canadian Armed Forces?
The honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Chair, as I stated before, the Chief of Defence Staff is responsible for the administration and command of the Canadian Armed Forces and all the personnel. They will have a discussion, and I asked them to give them this.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Will Mr. Norman rejoin free of bias, hatred, and vindictiveness, starting with the minister's office, the CDS, and all others?
The honourable Minister of National Defence.
Mr. Chair, I completely disagree with the insinuations that the member is making. When it comes to the entire process, it has been independent, and that's exactly how we're going to be carrying on from here. Thank you.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Has the minister or his staff received any direction from the PMO regarding which fighter jets will be eligible for the upcoming request for the proposals?
The honourable minister.
So happy that we got a question regarding how we're going to serve our Canadian Armed Forces members. And this entire process, Mr. Chair, is based on a process, open and fair competition, and the RFP will be shortly out. Thank you.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Will the F-35 be eligible for consideration as a replacement for the CF-18s?
Honourable Minister.
Competition that's going to be, and that any company that wants to bid for it can. What I asked the member here, Mr. Chair, is the leader of their party stated that they wanted open competition, but they're also now pointing to it. So I'm kind of a little confused. Are they in charge, or is the leader in charge?
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
In terms of interoperability with the U.S. Air Force and our commitments through NORAD, is the F-35 the best fit?
The honourable Minister of National Defence.
The interoperability as part of our NORAD mission is absolutely important, and this is one of the requirements, Mr. Chair. And through this competition, the right aircraft will be selected.
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Is the F-35 the best suited to fulfill the Five Eyes interoperability commitments?
The honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, we will find out through the competition of which aircraft will be selected based on our requirements. My question is, does she disagree with the Leader of the Opposition when he stated that he wanted an open competition to replace our fighter fleet?
The honourable member.
Were any code words used to bypass ATIPs regarding Operation Honor?
The honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, the ATIP process is completely independent, and we're absolutely committed to making sure that the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces have the environment to succeed in the Canadian Armed Forces through Operation Honor.
The honourable member.
Will the minister instruct the department to investigate whether any code words or phrases were used on other files to avoid ATIPs?
The honourable Minister.
Chair, the ATIP process is completely independent of our process, and expect all members of the Canadian Armed Forces to act in a professional manner as they do, in which the previous member who had asked those questions obviously disagreed. And my question to the member is, does she agree with her?
The honourable member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
Did the minister ever receive instruction from the PMO to use code words or on ATIPs?
The honourable Minister.
No, Mr. Chair.
The honourable member.
Will the minister release any and all documents in which code words or phrases were used to bypass ATIPs which have already been fulfilled?
The honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair, when it comes to the 8-kit process, it is completely independent of my office. Thank you.
Resuming debate, reprise du débat, the honourable member for Bay of Quinte.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening about Department of National Defence and Canadian Armed Forces. Tonight I would like to discuss how our government is caring for our women and men in uniform. The main estimates presented today represent funding that will directly support the people of our Canadian Armed Forces. Supporting them is #1 priority of the